Do you ever notice how some people don't feel lonely the way others do, even when they're alone for long stretches of time, but at the same time, they don't feel fully comfortable when someone gets too close either? Almost like connection itself comes with a quiet kind of pressure you can't explain, and you find yourself wondering if staying single is really a choice you made or something that slowly shaped you over time without you realizing it. Because on the surface, it looks like independence, it sounds like freedom, it even feels like control, but underneath that, there's something quieter, something harder to name, something that doesn't show up in conversations, but lingers in moments when everything is still and there's no distraction left to hold on to. You might tell yourself you just haven't found the right person yet, or that you enjoy your space, or that relationships feel complicated and unnecessary, and part of that might be true, but there are also these small, almost invisible patterns that show up in the way you think and feel, like how you hesitate before opening up, how you rehearse your words in your head before saying them, how you notice every small shift in someone's tone or energy, even when they haven't said anything directly. And it's not because you're overreacting, it's because somewhere along the way, your mind learned that understanding people was safer than being understood by them. So you became good at observing, good at reading between the lines, good at staying emotionally aware without fully stepping into the experience yourself. And this creates a strange kind of balance where you can connect with people on the surface. You can talk, laugh, even share parts of yourself, but there's always a layer that stays protected, untouched, almost like there's a boundary you didn't consciously build, but it's there, quietly shaping how close anyone is allowed to get. And when you think about being in a relationship, it's not always the idea of the person that feels heavy. It's the idea of being seen too clearly, because being seen means being known, and being known means there's a possibility of being misunderstood, overlooked, or not fully received. And even if that hasn't happened in obvious ways recently, your system remembers something. It carries a kind of emotional memory that doesn't need words to exist. It just shows up as hesitation, as distance, as the need to keep certain parts of yourself just out of reach. This is why staying single doesn't always feel like loneliness in the traditional sense. It feels more like a controlled environment, a space where nothing unexpected can disrupt your emotional balance, where you don't have to explain your moods, where you don't have to adjust yourself to someone else's expectations, and for a while, that can feel peaceful, even empowering, because there's no risk of disappointment when there's no one close enough to disappoint you. But there are also moments, usually quiet ones, where something shifts, where you notice a kind of emptiness that isn't dramatic or overwhelming, just subtle, like a background noise you can't turn off. And it's not necessarily about wanting a relationship. It's more about wondering what it would feel like to be understood without having to explain everything, to be with someone who doesn't make you feel like you have to filter yourself or stay alert all the time. And then your mind steps in, analyzing, questioning, reminding you of all the reasons why staying single makes sense, why it's safer, why it's easier. And this is where overthinking becomes part of the pattern, not as a flaw, but as a form of protection. Because if you can think through every possibility, every outcome, every emotional risk, then maybe you can avoid getting hurt. Maybe you can stay one step ahead of anything that might disturb the stability you've built. But the cost of that kind of awareness is that it becomes difficult to relax into connection, because connection requires a certain level of uncertainty, a willingness to not have everything figured out, And for someone whose mind is constantly scanning for meaning, for signals, for potential shifts, that kind of uncertainty doesn't feel exciting, it feels exhausting. So you stay where things feel manageable, where you can predict your own emotions, where you don't have to depend on someone else's consistency. And from the outside, it can look like strength, like independence, like you've chosen a life that works for you, and in many ways you have. But there's also a deeper layer where this isn't just a preference, it's a pattern that developed quietly, shaped by experiences where your emotional world had to become self-contained. Imagine someone who learned early on that expressing too much didn't always lead to being understood, that opening up didn't always create closeness, that sometimes it led to confusion or silence or being dismissed in ways that were subtle but lasting. And over time, that person doesn't stop feeling. They just start processing everything internally. They become their own listener, their own regulator, their own source of stability. And while that creates resilience, it also creates distance, not just from others, but from the idea that someone else could hold space for them in the same way. So when you think about relationships, it's not just about finding the right person, it's about whether your system even feels safe enough to let someone in without immediately preparing for the possibility that it might not last, that it might not be consistent, that it might require you to adjust in ways that feel uncomfortable. And this is where emotional sensitivity becomes both a strength and a barrier. Because you feel things deeply, you notice things others might miss. You pick up on emotional undercurrents that aren't spoken and that makes you incredibly aware. But it also means that being close to someone can feel overwhelming because you're not just experiencing your own emotions, you're processing theirs too, often without even trying. So staying single becomes a way to manage that intensity, to keep your emotional environment at a level that feels sustainable. And again, this isn't something you consciously decided one day. It's something that formed gradually, through patterns, through experiences, through small moments that taught your mind and body what to expect from closeness. And maybe there are times when you question it, when you wonder if you're missing something, or if this is just who you are, and those questions don't always have clear answers. Because this isn't about something being wrong or right, it's about understanding how your inner world was shaped and how that continues to influence the choices you make now, even the ones that feel natural. What do you actually feel when someone shows consistent interest in you? Not just casually, but genuinely. Do you feel calm? Or do you feel a subtle kind of pressure building, like something is about to change, like you might lose the sense of control you've become used to? And when someone gets emotionally closer, do you lean in, or do you start to notice small reasons to create space? Not because the person did something wrong, but because something inside you shifts. And when you imagine a relationship, do you picture connection, or do you picture responsibility, expectation, and the quiet fear of not being fully understood? Because sometimes staying single isn't about avoiding people, it's about avoiding the emotional weight that comes with being deeply known. And yet, there's also a part of you that understands connection on a level that not everyone does, because you've spent so much time observing, reflecting, analyzing. You've developed a kind of emotional intelligence that allows you to see things clearly, even when they're not being said out loud. And that part of you doesn't reject connection, it just approaches it carefully, slowly, almost cautiously, because it knows how much is at stake. So, the truth about people who stay single isn't as simple as independence or fear or preference. It's layered, it's complex, it's shaped by experiences that don't always look significant from the outside. but leave a lasting imprint on how someone relates to others and to themselves. And sometimes, staying single is not about rejecting love. It's about navigating a world where love has always felt a little unpredictable, a little uncertain, a little harder to trust completely. And maybe, in the quiet moments where there's no need to explain yourself, no need to perform or adjust, you find a kind of peace in that, a sense of stability that feels real, even if it comes with questions that don't always have answers. And instead of trying to label it or fix it, you just sit with it, noticing the patterns, noticing the feelings, noticing the way your mind works, not as something broken, but as something that adapted in its own way, for reasons that made sense at the time, even if they're hard to fully see now.